So this past weekend, Solo, a Star Wars story, debuted in theaters to what by any estimation would be considered disappointing box office returns for a Star Wars movie. In the United States alone, it only made between $80 and $85 million for the 3-day weekend. Over the 4-day, it's going to be about $103 million. And internationally, it made $65 million for the 3-day total. As a point of comparison, Rogue One, the other spin-off movie, debuted to about $150 million just in the United States over a 3-day weekend. Last Jedi made about $220 million domestically, and The Force Awakens made $250 million. You do basic math on that. This movie did about half of what Rogue One did about a third of what Last Jedi and The Force Awakens did. That's not good. The reviews were decent. They weren't bad. The audience reaction seems to have been pretty good, both anecdotally, and the cinema score for it was an A-. So people that saw it, generally speaking, had a mostly positive experience with it, but it's just not making the money that you expect a Star Wars movie to make. With that out of the way, let's dive into my 6 reasons that Solo disappointed at the box office. And as I go into these, box office results are really complex things. So it's not that these are in isolation as I list them. It's the combination of all of them. It's the full package as to why the movie didn't do all that well. With that said, let's get started. So reason number 1, there was a lack of interest in a Han Solo movie. So whenever Disney bought Lucasfilm, they announced very early on, we're going to do a new trilogy of episode movies, 7, 8, 9. And the other thing we're going to do is we're going to do spin-off movies on the off years. And as soon as they did that, there was speculation of what they were going to do, and it was all the same obvious stuff. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Boba Fett, Yoda, and Han Solo. And then a couple years later, they announced, we are moving forward. We are doing a Han Solo movie. We are so excited to do this. And the internet kind of went, I don't know that I want to see a Han Solo movie. I don't know that I want someone besides Harrison Ford to play Han Solo. You had people that were excited. You had people that just this basic idea of Han Solo movie was very interesting to them. You had people that once they announced Lord Miller, like, oh man, that'll be an interesting little story inside the Star Wars universe. But then a lot of people, me very much included in this category, were like, I don't know that I want to see that. This feels like a prequel that can only cause problems, that will answer questions that I'm not asking with answers that I don't want. And a lot of people fell into that category. So right out of the gate, it was a movie that was pretty divisive in the way people immediately took the idea that they were going to do a Han Solo movie. Reason number 2, director trouble. When you've got director trouble, that equals bad publicity, and bad publicity equals bad box office results. So if you weren't tracking along with this, originally they hired Lord and Miller, the guys that did the Lego movie, the guys that did 21 Jump Street, to direct this movie. And then they got 80% of the way through filming, and things went bad. There was a lot of issues behind the scenes, and basically they were having too much improvisation. They were moving away from the script too much. And so they got fired, and they replaced Lord and Miller, these two very modern, current, high energy improvisational directors, and replaced them with Ron Howard, which is a very big change of direction. Let's reshape things in a totally different direction, going with Ron Howard, who's a very safe director that we've seen him do all sorts of things over the last 30 years. You know what he's going to do if he directs a movie. And because of all that, that's bad publicity. People hear that and they go, wow, does Kathleen Kennedy know what she's doing? Who's steering the ship? Why would they hire Lord and Miller and then go in this opposite direction? Is this movie going to feel cobbled together, going from one director to these two directors to this director? How's this all going to play out? Is this movie going to get delayed? Like I firmly believed they were going to delay this movie back to December to give them more time to tighten things up, rework things, reshoot things. And they didn't. I was shocked by that they didn't do that. And so all of it leads to just a series of bad impressions of this movie when you have that type of director swap with such a drastic change of direction mid-production. Reason number 3 that this movie did poorly, The Last Jedi problem. So The Last Jedi came out about 6 months ago, and some people loved it, and then some people hated it. In other words, it was a very divisive film. And the haters, the people that are, I'm done, I hate Star Wars, you ruined Star Wars, that's a minority. But it's a very vocal minority that have been steering a lot of the internet discussion about Disney Star Wars over the last 5 months because they are so angry about what they did with that movie. And that, if you combine that with the bad vibes already surrounding this movie, all that together just creates a little bit of a bad taste surrounding this movie as we kind of think about it in this context, which leads to reason number 4, Star Wars fatigue. And I don't think this is the best phrase for what we're actually experiencing, because I don't think it's generic Star Wars fatigue. It's not like people don't like Star Wars anymore and they're totally burned out on it. I think it's much more of they don't need Star Wars at this frequency. The broad audience does not need a new Star Wars movie every 5 months. And that's what we have right now. When we've had 3 Star Wars movies in less than a year and a half, the novelty of a new Star Wars movie is gone. It's not like it was when The Force Awakens came out and it had been 10 years. We've had 3 in 18 months. And in addition to that, we've already seen what a spin-off movie is less than a year and a half ago once again. And so the novelty of a spin-off movie, it's gone. And that means as people think about this movie, they're not thinking, wow, another Star Wars movie. It's not a big event. It's not this cultural moment. It's just, am I excited about seeing a Han Solo movie? And a lot of people weren't. A lot of people are concerned about the director swap. A lot of people weren't crazy about Last Jedi. That's going to lower box office revenue as they're stacked so close together to one another. The 5th reason that it did poorly at the box office was lackluster marketing. So right out of the gate, this movie didn't start its marketing until the Super Bowl, which was about right around the beginning of February or late January. That's only a few months ago. You think about when they put the first trailer out for The Force Awakens, it was a full year before The Force Awakens came out. They put a trailer for this movie. They dropped it at the Super Bowl when 5 other trailers were dropped. It just wasn't an impactful thing. It was just kind of like, okay, here's the Solo trailer. And when they did release the trailers, they weren't awful. I didn't hear a lot of people that said, I was so excited and then now I'm not excited. It was more along the lines of, okay, that's what I expected it to be. Okay, that wasn't bad. But no one was wowed by it. I didn't hear anyone go, this guy is brilliant as Han Solo. No, the response was, okay, that's looks like a Han Solo movie without Harrison Ford, which didn't move the needle in a positive direction really for anyone. And when you combine all those together of people who are already concerned about Disney Star Wars, about this movie in general, had a little bit of fatigue for several different reasons, and then the marketing didn't win anyone over, you just don't have any momentum for your movie to get people to show up for that opening weekend. And then the 6th reason that this movie disappointed at the box office is simply because the budget was too high. And what I mean by that is that having now seen the movie has a budget of $250 million, and there's not $250 million of movie up on the screen. It's a movie that could have been made for maybe $100 million, $120 million. And the reason the budget is so inflated is almost certainly because of the reshoots, or Lord and Miller just blowing money, or Ron Howard, which I doubt Ron Howard was one blowing money. But because of the troubled production, that's why the budget probably got so elevated to such a high level. But if this movie had cost what it looks like it is on screen for the amount of special effects and big sequences, about $100 million, an $80 million opening weekend is great. It would be a very profitable movie if it was a $100 million movie, but it's not. It's a $250 million movie, in which case it might lose some money. And I think this movie, if they just set out right from the beginning, we're going to tell a different type of story, which they did, and therefore we're going to have a different type of budget. This is a Western in space. It's a heist movie in the Star Wars universe, and that does not need to have the same budget as The Last Jedi. Anyway, that's my take on it. Those are my 6 reasons that Solo, a Star Wars story, struggled at the box office, why it's disappointing, why it's underperforming, and kind of how do we got to this point in time where we're talking about a Star Wars movie. Like, these numbers aren't awful numbers. $80 million is a lot of money to make in 3 days, but when compared to other Star Wars movies, when compared to a lot of these recent Marvel movies, It is pretty disappointing by that comparison, hence why I think they should have had a much lower budget. And if you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos, but the key thing is I don't want to just talk about movies. I want to talk about movies and Star Wars and the box office and all that fun stuff with you. So join me down in the comment section. Tell me, why do you think that this movie disappointed so much at the box office? Why it was so much of a lower percentage of those previous Star Wars releases? Love to hear your take on it. And as always, thank you for watching.